Last week we celebrated the new church year. It's a bit odd celebrating the new church year when it's off from the rest of the world. But then again, there are plenty of people who celebrate the new year on a different date. In a little research, I found that there were lots of cultures actually that don't celebrate the new year on January 1st. Maybe the most famous that I can think of is the Chinese New Year. It's more of a lunar calendar, so that happens in February 1st, February 2nd this year. But there are many others that start their year in almost every month of the year. Apparently, it's much more chaotic than I thought. A lot more people are used to wishing people a happy new year on a day that's not January 1st. And this chaos is it's just odd, a weird juxtaposition. The world is doing one thing, and yet here they are doing something out of context almost. And what's worse, with during the Middle Ages in the Western Europe, the New Year was almost a movable feast for different country. You would go to one and it would be on March 1st, another March 25th. Maybe Easter or September 1st or December 25th even. But then when Pope Gregory XIII made the new calendar, the Gregorian calendar, most countries, when they adopted it, just set the beginning date of the year when he did, at January 1st. But really, it's all arbitrary. We need to keep track of the year, and one date is seemingly just as good as another. So why not pick a date that is meaningful? We can see what some people offered as the important day, Easter. Or if we wanted to make it a fixed day, March 25th. Easter works on a kind of lunar calendar, March 25th. If we were to celebrate Easter according to the solar calendar, it would be March 25th. See, the beginning of new life in Christ seems like a great day to start a new calendar year, a new year. Happy New Year with the coming of Christ. This would also be a great idea for ecumenism, because the Jews would celebrate the new year. We could it's normally within a couple days anyway, so we could at least say, well, on this day, we could both agree, since it's important to you and important to me, so maybe that would be good. But neither of these religions kept the Passover, Easter, March 25th as the start date for their new year. Within Judaism, the new year doesn't start on Passover, but on Rosh Hashanah, which happens in September or October. It happens then because it celebrates the beginning of the creation of the world. Actually, the ancient Israelites would walk a nice little balance. They would reckon the years of the king's reign according to the Passover. But the ordinary years, the years that would indicate whether the current year is an ordinary year or a sabbatical year or a jubilee year, all of these were based on the creation of the world, which according to Rosh Hashanah is when the new year occurred. So really cool, saying, well, the ruling of the world, of this world, we'll base that on Passover. But the ruling of everything will base on the creation of the world. Sounds very nice. Christians as well picked a new beginning for their year. Christmas would make sense, because this is the beginning of the life of Christ that has led to the sacrifice of the cross. Christmas wasn't actually celebrated until later, because the big event in the life of Christ for the average person was Easter. But when all of this was established, all the dates of everything became established, the church settled on Christmas being the beginning of the year. But you couldn't just go into Christmas. You can't just go into a new feast. You have to prepare yourself. Just look at all the preparation that goes into just our Christmas now, you go around and you see all the parties, and you see all the lights at night, and you see the parade that we just had on Thursday, and Denton just had their tree lighting on Friday. Everyone's getting us into the spirit of Christmas early. Same process with and so you can't just go into this. We have to prepare, and the lights start going up on Thanksgiving if we're lucky. You can't just go into a major holiday without first prepping. The same process was in place for the preparation of Easter, was also added to the preparation for Christmas. Thus, Advent was born. Initially, it began as a season of preparation on the feast of Saint Martin of Tours, and was late on November 11th, and was called the Lent of Saint Martin. But this was apparently deemed as too much fasting. And so then, in the 13th century, it was shortened to begin on the feast of Saint Andrew, November 28th. And then Pope Urban V changed it from a full fast to an abstinence. One where we can't eat it all, to one where, let's just make it a meatless fast. Abstinence. Let's just make it a little less than. And then in Vatican II, the emphasis was changed to differentiate it from Lent by emphasizing it as a season of hope. So now Advent is different than Lent. All of this to say that as we begin the year, not in Christmas, but by preparing for it in Advent. And it's weird to my ears to hear on the lips of liturgical Christians, Happy New Year in November or the beginning of December. Just after Thanksgiving, we begin to start to hear it. For that matter, it's similarly weird to hear Merry Christmas in January, well after the rest of the world has celebrated their new year. We are just an off bunch. But of course, this is good for our souls to be different from the world. Look at the difference between what they are emphasizing and what we are emphasizing. Christmas right now is mainly a consumer holiday. In order to prevent it from being completely like Ebenezer Scrooge, we allow a little bit of the religious holiday to bleed into it. And so in addition to our desire to buy as many things as we can, we also retain a bit of the goodwill towards men. This goodwill that the angel speaks of, we allow that to bleed into ours, so it's not entirely about consumerism. But what does this lead to? Look at the Christmases around. It leads to loneliness. It leads to depression, exhaustion, stress, overindulgence. And I could go on, but to sum it up, it leads to all the things that led to the coming of Christ in the first place. Unchecked sin in need of a remedy. Enter the Christian, like a John the Baptist. One crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare for the coming of the Lord, not with parties and buying all the other things that have become associated with how one prepares for Christmas, but an actual preparation for an actual feast. That way, when the actual feast comes, we won't be chomping at the bit to move on, but we'll be willing to stay in and bask in the glory of what the coming of the Lord means for us. Baruch tells us, take off the garment of your sorrow and affliction and put on forever the beauty of the glory from God. Put on the robe of the righteousness from God. Put on your head the diadem of the glory of the everlasting. For God will show your splendor everywhere under heaven. Fast when it is time to fast, and feast when it is time to feast. That way we can properly rid ourselves of that which prevents us from celebrating, that when the actual time to celebrate occurs, we need to fast when the time the time prepper. We need to spend time taking off all of these garments of sorrow and affliction so that when Christ comes, we can properly put on these things that Baruch tells us. We can celebrate our feast when it actually occurs, and we can celebrate it for days and days, 12 of them to be precise. Now I know that we have lost this war on Christmas. Not necessarily the one to keep Christ in Christmas, that one we're still fighting, but the one to keep Christmas in Christmas has long since been lost. And I doubt I will ever see a time when Advent is Advent and Christmas is Christmas as far as the world is concerned. This makes me sad. At times it makes me frustrated. At times it even makes me angry. But I know that it is my task, and actually the task of the church, to be this lone voice calling in the wilderness, telling us to prepare the way of the Lord. And until that day, until the day when we see that Christmas and Advent, we will be there telling each other Happy New Year in November and Merry Christmas in January. But we will be doing this, we will be here because eventually we will be needed. And we will be able to provide for that lost and broken world the light of Christ in the midst of the secular Christmas. We will tell them that actually what is needed right now is not a little Christmas right this very second, but a time in which we recognize what is coming and actually wait. Wait, not so that we can make sure all the packages are wrapped with a nice little bow and the stockings are hung by the fire with care, but so that we can walk with Mary and Joseph and see the darkness of the night where they could find no room. So we can prepare such that we may be able to say, as meek and meager as this stall is, I have a place where the King of Kings and Lord of Lords may be born. I have made room for him here, if nowhere else in the world. There is room for him in my heart to be born right here. This, I think, would be better than any Christmas party in November ever conceived. All the symbolism is already present as we walk out and see the decorations that the world has already set up. But just like secular Christmas, it falls short if we do not provide people with the proper timing and the proper attitude to utilize it. So we say during this time, Happy New Year. So that, like with the secular New Year, we can make those New Year's resolutions and amend our lives to set them on a path to greet Christ when he comes. We may be the only ones, but so was John the Baptist. And he was weird too, dressing in camel's hair and eating locusts and wild honey. But despite his weirdness, when the people figured out what he had to offer, they came to him in droves. And with the people all around him, he could point them to Christ, which is the true meaning of Christmas anyway, right? The coming of Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.